Hi. Good morning. So, I'm calling this channel or these videos because I'm going to make a series of videos about my life, but I'm calling it The Making of a Watchman. And I say Watchman very lightly because, um, in my experiences, it appears to be that way, but, you never can be sure unless God, you know, tells you. So this is my story. The reason that I'm making these videos is because I attend a church group that we offer wasn't we call it noonday prayer. We offer intercessory prayer for people who are going through things or they just need prayer. And the pastor said to me, one of the pastors said that it would probably be a good idea to find people that have the same experiences that you have, because there's no one there that does. And that it would probably help them, help me, or give us understanding. So I said, you know what? Okay, that's what I'll do. So, I thought long and hard about it, and I couldn't find a way to do that. I mean, you just can't go around and ask people, hey, do you see demons? Do you have dreams? Whatever. But so my daughter suggested that I make YouTube videos because, I'm sure there's somebody out here that's going through the same thing. So here I am. So this is my story. So I wrote it down so I don't ramble on. So I'm a dreamer. I've always been a dreamer. Sometimes I have open visions. Open visions are like these spiritual experiences where you'll see a person or object or image, and it'll just like flash in front of your face, which are, you're wide awake and your eyes are wide open. So those are like open visions. So I have those sometimes, but I'm mostly a dreamer. So some of the people I dream about, I don't know, and then some I do. But the thing about this here, why I say watchman lightly, is because when you read about watchmen in the Bible, like in Ezekiel or Isaiah, you read stories of them being a person that needed to warn, that you would see things and then you needed to warn Israel or warn whoever. So my situation appears to be a bit different. So I can tell you in a later video why I think it is this way, but mine is a bit different because, as I said, it doesn't seem as if I'm to warn people. The experiences that I have, some of the people I don't even know. Some of the people are like in faraway places. Some people I'm familiar with that they're actually like, let's just say well-known people, like a movie star or whatever. I've had dreams about their life and their situation, and when I first dreamed of them, I thought, well, this is crazy. Like how can I know anything about them? And then I did some research on their life and found out that what I was actually dreaming of them was real. So some of the people that I dream about, I don't know. So I know you can't possibly warn someone you don't even know. I see faces and I see people's lives, and I just pray about it. So it seems as if basically I'm seeing. This is what I've come to realize, that I'm seeing the plans of the enemy before they're actually in this physical realm, as if he's planning this thing up and I'm seeing it in the spiritual realm, and it's like I'm almost like a gatekeeper, like I'm stopping these things from crossing over into the physical, to this physical realm. Now, I don't know, there's a lot of people who probably don't believe in that sort of thing, but if you believe in God, you can't believe just some parts of the Bible and not believe everything. I mean, these things are spoken about in the Bible, so this is true. I mean, you read about demonic possessions and things like that, and God is not a man that he should lie. So these are true occurrences. Now, anyway, like I said, I dream about people I don't know and people that I do know. So I noticed that I've had some times that when I go to sleep and I'm not actually in a dream, but I can hear someone talking, and I've heard someone or something, I would say a being, say to me, like sometimes it'll try to talk me into saying things. Like I'll hear something like, something about my family member, like, yeah, they're going to be in the accident or whatever. And then I hear them say, and now that should be established. So I wake up like, what? So hearing that, it made me realize that these things that I'm dreaming are not yet established. And so I've made that part of my prayer. So when I pray for these people, I say these things after I pray for each person. I say, and the plans of the enemy shall not be established in their lives. I do a lot of decreeing and declaring that they're going to be all right, that these things are not going to happen. And like I said, some people I know and some people I don't. But I used to have these dreams, and most of the time they still do occur around a certain time of the night. It's usually between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. And the way that that came to be was this, and it's a long story, which I'm going to tell you in later videos, but just to give you some information about it, I initially would have these attacks. Now I was involved in a heavy amount of spiritual warfare. There was something going on with my son. It was a big situation, which I'm going to share later. But anyway, I used to have these attacks and it would happen throughout the day. Now these attacks felt as if, and I would just say, I mean, it didn't feel that way, but if you really look at what happened during the attacks, I would say a doctor would probably say it would be an anxiety attack. But that's not what it was, because they would come and I could physically feel that there was someone standing next to me or across from me or whatever, standing in the room. I could feel, but I could not see. I could perceive that there was something there. And then I would have these attacks that felt as if my heart was going to pop out of my chest. It would be something like a paralyzing fear. That's the only thing I could call it, because it was such a tremendous fear. It was terrifying. The most terrified I've ever felt. I mean, fear beyond fear. You can have someone jump out at you, scare you. No, it was way beyond that. It was almost like a fear that you felt like it would kill you. And my heart would just boom, 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 boom. And it would happen all throughout the day. And then what happened one day, it was really, really bad. And I remember I was listening to this song. I'm not going to say the song, but I was listening to the song, and I remember the words said something like, we got like victory because of what Jesus has done for us. And I remember I was in this violent attack, and I said out of my mouth, it was almost like I had a moment of revelation or wisdom or some type of understanding. And I said to this thing, I turned to where I could feel this thing was standing, and I said, I bust out laughing, and I said, ha ha ha, like, why are you wasting your time with me? You're fighting a battle that you've already lost. You know what Jesus did. And that was it. It left. And then I started having these attacks at night between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. So they went on for almost a year. It was a tremendous amount of attacks. I can't even tell you. Every single night. I barely slept. I was like out of my head, so tired. And then other things were happening too, but right now I'm just going to try to explain as to why the dreams come between 3 and 5. So I would have these attacks, and then I thought, like, oh my God, what is going on? Like, why won't this stop? I would pray, I went to the church, all these things. But then one particular night, I got up at 3 because my body would just automatically wake up at 3. I got up at 3. And I felt someone standing there. So I was preparing myself. Oh, here it is. Here goes, this attack. And instead of being attacked, someone was standing there, and they said to me, why don't you pray in your sleep? And I said to okay, I will. Like, I'm in this stage of like half sleep, half awake. I said, yeah, okay. Got up and I went and, used the restroom. And when I got in the restroom, I realized, I said, oh my God. Somebody just said that to me, and I'm honest to God, they sounded like Morpheus from, the whatever that movie is. Like he was the one that like awakened the man, Neo or whatever. So it sounded like Morpheus, almost like it was an awakening. So, sometimes God will show you things in ways that he knows that you can understand. So to me, using that voice let me know that this was an awakening for me. Sometimes you'll see things in your dream that'll look like certain people. And if you really look at it, it'll be someone that had this particular personality. So that's just God showing you them to let you know that this is what this means, to perceive it this way. So yeah, so anyway, they sound like Morpheus. So I knew this was an awakening. So I said, okay, so I'm going to start to pray in my sleep. Now, I didn't know how I was going to do that, but I said I'm going to try. So every night I would go to bed praying, and when I would wake up to use the bathroom, I would be praying. And I would just I would just pray, and then sometimes I would wake up and I would still be praying, and somehow, I would be praying in my sleep, and then I realized that I actually, like in my dreams, or even when I'm not dreaming, when I'm sleeping, I'm not fully asleep. Like I'm aware that I'm laying here in the bed. I've said to myself when I'm asleep, I better wake up and look at the clock and see if it's time for me to get up for work. So I never oversleep ever. My spirit, I guess, just wakes me up. But anyway, though, so that's how it came to be between 3 and 5. So I would have these dreams, and then I did the praying in my sleep, and it stopped, and then the dream started. And then I started having all these dreams about people, plans of the enemy. And so now, I don't really wake up between 3 and 5 anymore. I just have the dreams. But I get up at like midnight, usually always around midnight time. And I just pray for all these people that I've dreamt about, their situations, things that, the enemy wants to do in their life, people I know, people I don't know. And it's just, yeah. So anyway, that's just a backstory. But so that's how I got to be where I am right now. But in the beginning, well, what I did find out is that my grandmother was also a watchman. When I think back on her life, is when she was when she was still alive. She's been going for about 20 years now. But when I think back on her life, I do recall her having these dreams, and she used to always warn people and say, I dreamt I saw you beat up in the alley, or I dreamt I saw and I remembered that. And then I also remembered that my grandmother used to also have these attacks. And I remember her going to the doctors, and they diagnosed her with some form of angina. They never gave her any medicine, but that's what they thought it was. But I remember she used to have the same attacks. But I didn't remember that until just recently. But anyway, so how sorry, my daughter's camera died. But just to finish off with that, so as I was doing, I was giving backstory on how I got to be where I am right now. But also, I just wanted to tell you just the dreams that I initially had when I was a child that let me know that there was something that, was a little different about me. So the first that I remember was before I started school. I dreamt that I was flying through these tunnels of light and dark tunnels, and I looked on the side of me to see how I was flying. I'm just a little girl. And I saw these little beings about, this big, maybe this big. And they had little wings, and they were all around me, maybe 30, 40 of them, whatever, flying me through these tunnels. And then I heard them singing, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. And I thought, wow, how beautiful is this? And I'm just a little girl. But I remember when I woke, I told my grandma, and they thought it was cute. So that was the first dream. Okay, that was the very first dream that I remember. The next dream I had, I don't know what you would call this type of dream, but I dreamt that my stepfather had made these kielbasa sausage, and he had them sitting on the kitchen table, and our dog had jumped up on the table and eaten the sausage. So I saw him rolling up a newspaper to spank the dog's nose or whatever. And when he went to hit him, it was no longer the dog. It was this puff of smoke like a Casper, what a child would call Casper, but it was black, completely black. And I saw him hitting at it, swatting at it around the house and whatnot. And then I saw it go out the window. And then later on that day, well, when I woke up that morning, rather, I heard my stepfather telling my mother, "Hey, I had this stupid dream last night about this black smoke, describing my dream." So I remember saying, "Hey, how does he know my dream?" So I said, "That's my dream. You didn't have that dream, whatever." So of course they told me to shut up. I'm just a kid with this big imagination. So the second time that happened, my grandfather was missing in action. He was part of one of those, wars like Korean War, Vietnam, World War II, something, one of those wars. But he was missing in action for, I guess about a year, I suppose. I know it was a long span of time because in the summer he was missing, and then I remember I was finally in school when I had the dream. So, at least a few months. So I dreamt that I was standing at the end of my mother's bed, at the foot of her bed, and she's laying in the bed asleep. And then on the side of her was her nightstand, and she had a little rotary phone. Back then we used a rotary phone. And I remember the phone rang, and she answered the phone, and it was my grandfather. And he says to her, hey, I know you guys are looking for me. I just want to let you know that I'm safe. I'm with God. Stop looking. No need to worry, whatever. So, I woke up the next day and I didn't think any more of it until my mother dropped me off at my grandmother's house. I guess she was going to work or whatever. And I heard her say, hey, Mom, I had this dream about Pop last night. I dreamt that he called me on the phone. She told my whole dream. So I said, no, that's my dream, whatever. Of course, they didn't believe me. So, that was the third time. Well, the second time I had that particular type of dream. But that was the third dream that gave me an understanding that something was a little different here. So, the next dream I had, my mother was going to buy this house. Now, I can tell you this house, this is like 50 years ago. And this house is still vacant. Nobody has ever moved in this house. So I don't know if God has given people warnings but nobody has ever moved into this house. Now, right now, the house is redone and it's beautiful. So hopefully nobody moves into it. But anyway, I had this dream. My mother was going to buy this house. And I don't remember the dream, to be honest with you. I don't even remember having the dream. I just remember when I awoke. And at this time, I probably was in like the kindergarten, maybe first grade. Um, but I remember when I woke, I heard an audible voice say in my ear as if they were standing next to me, tell your mother not to buy that house because it's bad. So, naturally I tell her, yeah, Mom, God told me to tell you don't buy that house. It's a bad house. And, she said, shut up, whatever, shut me up because, I'm just a child. So then I heard the same audible voice tell me, now tell your grandmother and great grandmother. At the time, my great grandmother was still alive, and my grandmother. So I said, okay. So anyway, I go to my grandmother's house. My mother drops me off. I don't know, and I tell my grandmother's what God told me. Tell my mom not to buy the house because the house is bad. And then I tell them all about it. I said, there's this knives on the wall. So as soon as immediately when I said knives on the wall, they look at each other like, okay, here's one of these the mind of a child, whatever. So I said, yeah, there's knives on the wall. There's cheese in the refrigerator. Between the refrigerator and the cabinet is a wheelchair, and an old lady used to sit in there, and they used to beat her up. And then I said there was two little girls that died in the house. They're twins. Their clothes are still in the cabinet. And on the back porch, there's another wheelchair that they used to push the lady off the porch. So I tell my grandma these things. And, they're spiritual, they're Christians, Baptists at that time. They were Baptists. And they say, oh, maybe there's some truth to it, but whatever. So they go with us, my mom, to go view this house because we were supposed to see the house the next day, the night I had the dream. So we get to the house, the realtor's there. As soon as immediately when she opens the door, on the wall I see this circle rack. I don't know if it's wood or resin or whatever it is, but there's like all these knives on it, like stacked up on it. And there's like big ones like the Sinbad knives, the swords and whatnot, and all kinds of knives on this plaque, on this rack. So, I say, oh, look, Grandma, see, there's the knives. So then my great grandmother, she goes with the realtor and with my mother, and they're viewing the house. But at the same time, I take my grandmother and I say, come on, let me show you the cheese. So I take her into the kitchen and I open the refrigerator and there's a pack of cheese in there. And I said, see, there's the cheese. And then I pull out the wheelchair from behind the refrigerator. And then I said, see, and this is the wheelchair that the old lady used to sit in and they used to beat her up and everything. And then at that point, the realtor comes down the steps and she says, hey, little girl, why don't you come up and see, your new room or whatever. So I'm like, oh, I'm not going up there. The little girl's died in there. So my grandma says, I'm going to go with you. It's okay. So we get up into this room, and sure enough, there's dresses in there, multiple dresses, like sets, different sets of just like two pink, two blue, two green. You could clearly see that twins lived there. So I said, see, here's the twins' dresses, and they're still here in the closet, and they died in this room, and they didn't take any of their things because all of them died. So, apparently I dreamt it. I don't even remember having the dream, but I just knew everything that was in the house. So then, my grandmother gets uneasy, so we go outside. She takes me outside to like calm me down, and then I take her around the back of the house, and I show her the wheelchair on the back porch that they used to push, the old lady in and knock her down or whatever. So, needless to say, my mother didn't buy the house, thank God, because my grandmother talked her, told her, don't buy this house. God told this child that this house wasn't good, and everything that she dreamt, it is as she says, So that was another dream I had, and that is when I realized that there was something here, something here. And there was also, I noticed that I had this where if I would fall asleep and start to have a nightmare where I could just pull myself right out, automatically wake myself out, like, out of the dream. I've realized that, I was never all the way asleep, that I was always conscious that I was there. I was always conscious of what was happening in the room. I'm a light sleeper. I can hear everything that goes on. It's like I'm never really fully asleep. I don't know if it's that your spirit doesn't sleep, or honestly, I don't know. But that's the kind of sleeper I am. But this is just backstories of what led me up to this point. And to be honest with you, these dreams that I had as a child were like the most innocent ones that I've had. I've had some, well, I'll tell you about that at a later time. But the reason, like I said, I'm making this video is an attempt to help somebody. Maybe there's somebody that's going through the same thing. Maybe somebody else is dreaming dreams like this. Maybe somebody else is seeing the plans of the enemy. Maybe somebody else has had a life like this, or, maybe they're confused. I just want you to know that you are not alone. And God has a plan for your life. Now, what that is, right now, I'm still learning. I can't honestly tell you. I just know that we are in God's hands, and He said no harm will come to us. And I believe every single word He says. Um, but like I say, this is just a means to find other people like me, or means to help somebody, um, you know, just to bring light to this. That and I don't know if this has always been this way. They've always been watchmen, or if this is just because of the times changing and because of the way the condition of the world, why there are so many people that may be watchmen now. I don't know. I don't know if God is calling to the watchmen and we are awakening. I don't know. But this is just a means to start this page. So I'm going to make additional videos, and I'm going to start from the beginning. And it hasn't always been nice, to be honest with you. I don't have much nice things to say except that what God has done for me. But my life was just like kind of like a bunch of trials and tribulations and stuff that led to this point. And I don't know if this is probably what's necessary to get you to this point to be a watchman. But anyway, like I said, I'm going to make other videos. But thank you for listening. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to me ramble. And I hope you have a good day. Bye.